Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a really detailed guide on managing your money. Got the source right here.
Yep.
And our mission really is to pull out the absolute key stuff, the things that help you, understand debt, credit, and actually start getting a handle on your finances.
And we should probably just say up front, like the source does, that thinking about this stuff can feel, well, pretty heavy. Maybe you've got credit card debt piling up. Maybe just the word budgeting makes you want to run away, or it all just feels like this big tangled mess.
Yeah, where do you even start, right? If that sounds familiar, look, you're definitely not alone. Millions of people feel that way.
Exactly.
So what we want to do in this deep dive is pull out the practical, actionable bits from the source, give you a clear starting point, and hopefully a way forward that feels doable.
Right. Because the source is super clear on this. Step one is always understanding where you actually stand. Sounds basic, but it's crucial.
And the first action item for that, according to this guide, checking your credit reports. But not just one.
No, definitely not just one. The source really pushes this. You need reports from all three big bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion.
Why all three?
Well, because lenders don't always report the same info to each one. So one report might be missing something or have an error the others don't. Checking all three. That gives you the real, complete picture of how lenders see you.
Okay, makes sense. Get the full story. So beyond what lenders see, there's what you see, right? Where your own money is actually going day to day.
Absolutely. The source puts a huge spotlight on tracking your spending, and especially like the small cash stuff. The coffee here, the snack there, stuff that doesn't show up on a bank statement.
A little leaks.
Exactly. Little leaks, little dribbles. The guide basically says you need to track everything for a bit. It's not about judging yourself. It's just discovery, finding out where that money is disappearing to, like a little treasure hunt for hidden cash flow.
Okay, treasure hunt. I like that framing. And part of that map, that terrain, is also what you own, right? Your assets.
Yes. Listing your assets, what you own, and roughly what it's worth is key. The source points out a few reasons.
Like what?
Well, one, understanding what might be at risk if things got really bad financially. Two, seeing if you have assets you could potentially sell to maybe avoid a crisis like bankruptcy. And three, just seeing what you actually have to show for any debt you might carry. It's your personal balance sheet.
Gotcha. So you track the spending, you list the assets, you know your income. Then what?
Then you use the simple formula the source provides. Inflows your income minus outflows your spending equals your net cash flow.
Simple math, but powerful.
Very. Because if that number is negative, that's your money screaming at you that you're spending more than you're earning. It's a clear sign something needs to change. Either boost income or, usually more immediately doable, cut expenses. This whole assessment, it's the foundation.
Okay, foundation laid. You know where you are. The source says the very next step is deciding where you want to go. You got to connect that assessment to actual goals.
Right. And the source asks some pretty deep questions here. It's not just, I want to pay off my credit card. It's, how quickly do you want to tackle that consumer debt? What's your vision for retirement? How are you thinking about future healthcare costs? It even gets into aligning your money decisions with your, personal values. What character traits matter to you? And maybe what would you regret not spending money on later?
Wow. Okay. That values part feels really different. It makes finance less about just numbers and more about, building the life you actually want.
Totally. And the source insists, write these goals down, makes them real, tangible.
Right, not just vague ideas floating around.
And it acknowledges the tricky parts, too, like getting on the same page with a partner if you have different views on money, or dealing with kids who, want everything now versus the family's longer-term financial health.
Yeah, those are real-world pressures.
Yeah.
What about dealing with stress and setbacks? Money problems are stressful.
Big time. The guide offers some solid advice here. Try to keep a positive attitude. Remember, you're not the first person to face this. Find inspiration, maybe stories of others who got through it, and, importantly, accept the things you truly can't change right now, like maybe a job loss. Focus on what you can control.
Makes sense. Control what you can control.
It also suggests finding cheap or free ways to still enjoy life. Picnics, parks, potlucks with friends, hitting the library, maybe even growing a little bit of your own food if you can. Simple stuff matters when things are tight.
I like that. And one thing that jumped out at me from the source here was how blunt it is about excuses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it calls out the common ones like, I don't have time, or it's just too much work to figure out. The message is pretty clear. Stop the excuses and commit to making the changes.
Tough love, but probably necessary. Which leads us straight into the main tool the source really pushes for getting that control: budgeting.
Ah, the B word. The source even admits it can send chills down your spine.
Huh. Yeah, it knows it's not always popular. But it frames budgeting not as like a punishment, but as your map, your plan.
So how does the guide suggest setting one up? The basics.
Pretty straightforward, really. Step 1, list all your income sources and all your expenses, everything. Step 2, decide on a time frame. Usually monthly works best for most people.
Yeah.
Step 3, calculate that net cash flow again based on what you've listed. See where you stand right now. And step 4, the crucial one: adjust, look at your spending, and make deliberate choices based on what you found. Cut back where needed.
And you mentioned tracking cash earlier. That seems vital here.
Absolutely vital. If you don't track the cash, your budget has holes in it. You're just guessing.
Right. The source also talks about using standard percentages as guidelines, like for housing.
Yeah, give some examples. Like maybe aim for basic housing costs, rent, or mortgage principal and interest to be around 25% of your take-home pay. Maybe closer to 35% if you include taxes, insurance, maintenance.
But these are just guidelines, right? Not hard rules.
Exactly. The source really stresses that. They're just ballpark figures, highly dependent on where you live, your income, your situation. Use them for analysis, not as rigid commands.
So the real point of the budget, according to the guide, isn't about feeling deprived.
Not at all. It's about liberation, actually. It's about intentionally directing your money so you have funds available to save or invest for those goals you set earlier. It's about being purposeful with your spending.
Makes sense. And it throws in some practical tips for cutting costs too, right?
Oh, yeah. Things like cooking more at home instead of getting takeout or prepared foods, finding free entertainment options, using coupons. It even mentions specific coupon websites. Little things add up.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Credit and debt. The source breaks this down pretty clearly.
It does. Starts with the basics: secured credit versus unsecured. Secured is backed by something tangible, an asset. Think mortgages, car loans. If you don't pay, they can take the asset.
And unsecured.
That's just your promise to pay, like credit cards, medical bills, personal loans. There's no specific asset tied to it.
Got it. And when lenders are deciding whether to give you credit, the source talks about the 3 C's.
Right. Character, capacity, and collateral. Character is basically your track record. Are you reliable? Mostly judged by your payment history.
Okay.
Capacity is about your ability to handle more debt. They look at your income versus your existing debt payments. Can you afford this new payment?
Makes sense.
And collateral is about what assets you have that could potentially back the loan, even if it's technically unsecured. It shows financial strength.
And where do lenders get all this info to judge the 3 C's?
Primarily from your credit reports. It all comes back to those reports from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Lenders report your behavior paying on time, balances, opening new accounts to these bureaus.
And all that data gets crunched into a credit score, like the FICO score.
Exactly. FICO is the most common one, typically ranging from 300 to 850. And that score is essentially trying to predict one thing: how likely are you to default on your debt in the near future?
So what goes into that score? What makes it go up or down?
The source breaks it down. Payment history is number 1. Huge impact. Paying bills on time is critical.
Okay. What else?
Amounts owed is big too, how much debt you have, especially compared to your credit limits. Length of credit history matters. Longer is generally better. New credit opening too many accounts quickly can hurt. And then there's credit mix, or variety.
Variety, like having different types of loans.
Yeah, having a mix like a mortgage, maybe a car loan, and a credit card or two, and managing them well can actually be slightly positive. It accounts for about 10% of the score, the source says. But the type of credit matters too. The source notes that certain types, like high balances on store cards or loans from finance companies, can be seen as riskier and might lower your score more than, say, having student loans or a mortgage.
Interesting. So it's not just if you have debt, but what kind and how you manage it.
Precisely.
And the consequences of having a bad score.
Yeah.
The source says it's more than just paying higher interest.
Fair. Oh, way more. You get hit with extra fees, late fees, over-limit fees on credit cards. Opportunities shrink. You'll likely pay significantly more for car insurance, maybe homeowners or renters insurance too.
Wow. Insurance too.
Yep. And in some fields, a bad credit report could even affect your job prospects if an employer checks credit as part of the hiring process. It causes enormous stress on families, and, crucially, it makes you a target.
A target for who?
Predatory lenders.
Yeah.
Payday loan places, high-interest loan sharks. They see bad credit as a sign of vulnerability, someone they can exploit. They see you as a mark.
Oof, that's grim. And speaking of risks, the source also covers identity theft pretty seriously.
Yeah, it's a major modern risk. And here's something that might surprise you from the guide.
What's that?
While we all worry about, complex hacking online, the source points out that a lot of ID theft is actually pretty low-tech. Often involves stealing physical mail, documents from your trash, or, disturbingly,
Right.
it's often committed by people the victim knows, maybe an acquaintance or roommate, sometimes even friends or relatives.
Wow, that is sobering, really sobering. So what does the guide suggest for prevention?
Well, given that low-tech angle, securing your physical documents at home is key. Shredding important papers, locking up sensitive files. Then there's the standard computer safety. Strong, unique passwords, firewalls, good antivirus and anti-spyware software. Be super wary of phishing emails or calls.
And scams.
Definitely. Be really skeptical of those business opportunities that sound too good to be true, like stuffing envelopes at home or medical billing schemes. Often they're just trying to get your personal information or an upfront fee.
Okay, good warnings. But what if the worst happens? What if you do become a victim?
Speed is everything, according to the source. Act fast. The steps are pretty clear. 1. Contact your creditors, immediately banks, credit card companies. 2. Contact the credit bureaus Equifax, Experian, TransUnion place fraud alerts on your reports. You might want to add a victim statement, too.
Okay, creditors, bureaus. Oh, what else?
3. File a report with the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. They have resources and track this stuff. 4. File a police report. You might need this later to prove fraud occurred if accounts were opened in your name. And 5. If you think mail was involved, notify the U.S. Postal Inspection Service.
That's a clear action plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so shifting back to dealing with debt you already have, if you're struggling to pay, what does the source recommend doing, like talking to the companies you owe?
Yes, but strategically. The guide says, do your homework first. Make a clear list of all your debts, who you owe, how much, then figure out, honestly, based on your budget, what you can actually afford to pay each month, even if it's less than the minimum.
So go unprepared.
Exactly. Then contact them. Explain your situation calmly and clearly. Here's a key piece of advice from the source. Do not agree to a payment plan you can't stick to just to get them off the phone.
That just kicks the can down the road,
Yeah.
right?
Totally. Be realistic. And if the person you're talking to isn't helpful or won't work with you, don't be afraid to politely ask to speak to a supervisor. Sometimes they have more authority.
Good tip. What about debt consolidation? Taking out one loan to pay off others. The source talks about that.
It does. It presents it as a tool that can be smart, but with a big flashing warning sign.
Which is?
It's really only a good idea if the new loan has a significantly lower interest rate than the debts you're paying off. You need to save money on interest for it to make sense.
And the warning sign.
The huge risk comes if you use something like a home equity loan or a AELOC, a home equity line of credit, to consolidate unsecured debts like credit cards.
Why is that so risky?
Because, as the source points out, you're basically trading unsecured debt for secured debt. You're putting your house on the line. If you can't make the payments on that home equity loan, you could actually lose your home. It's a massive gamble.
Wow. Okay. That's a critical distinction. Need to really weigh that risk.
Absolutely. And you need to look closely at the new loan terms, the monthly payment, sure, but also how long you'll be paying, the total interest cost, and watch out for any tricky stuff like balloon payments at the end.
This all sounds like a place where maybe getting some outside help would be good. Does the source mention that?
Definitely. It strongly recommends credit counseling, especially from nonprofit agencies. It even gives some names to look for, like the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, nfcc.org, or the Association of Independent Consumer Credit Counseling Agencies, ACA.org.
Why nonprofit specifically?
Because their main goal is to help you, not to make a profit off your situation. The counselors at these reputable agencies are typically trained and certified. They can help you really dig into your finances, create a budget that works, and explore options.
Like what kind of options?
One major tool they offer is called a debt management plan, or DMP.
How does a DMP work?
Okay, so with a DMP, the counseling agency works directly with your creditors. They try to negotiate lower interest rates or get fees waived on your behalf.
Oh, interesting.
Then, instead of paying all your different creditors, you make one single monthly payment to the counseling agency.
Okay.
And the agency distributes that money to your creditors according to the agreed plan. Usually, these plans are designed to get you debt-free in about 3 to 5 years.
That sounds potentially really helpful. Does it affect your credit score?
Yes, the source notes that being on a DMP will likely impact your credit score, usually negatively, at least while you're on it. Accounts might be closed or show they're being managed by a third party. But getting out of debt is the main goal there.
Right. Sometimes you have to take a temporary hit for long-term gain. What about bankruptcy? The source must mention that.
It does, but very much as a last resort option. It explains the two main types for individuals. Chapter 7, which involves selling off certain non-exempt assets to pay creditors.
Liquidation, basically.
Right. And Chapter 13, which is more like a reorganization. You set up a court-approved repayment plan, usually lasting 3 to 5 years, to pay back at least a portion of your debts.
The guide makes it clear it's not an easy fix, though.
Absolutely not. The source emphasizes it's not an easy way out. While filing does trigger an automatic stay, which temporarily stops most collection actions, it doesn't wipe out all debts. Things like recent taxes, child support, alimony, student loans usually still have to be paid.
Good to know.
And a really interesting, maybe sad detail the source includes is this growing trend of older Americans filing for bankruptcy. Often it's driven by crushing medical debt they just can't handle in retirement.
Wow, that's tough. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We really have. We've gone from that essential first step, just honestly assessing where you stand financially, through setting meaningful goals, getting a grip on budgeting, understanding the whole world of credit and debt.
The serious consequences of bad credit and ID theft, and finally, knowing where to turn for help, like legitimate credit counseling or, if absolutely necessary, bankruptcy.
It really paints a picture that taking charge isn't about some secret trick, is it? It's about understanding the pieces, looking at them honestly, taking consistent steps, and knowing help is available.
Exactly. It feels possible, even if it's challenging. It starts with understanding and then action.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a giant leap all at once. The source implies progress often starts with just one small step.
Which actually leads perfectly into our final thought for you, the listener.
Mm-hmm.
Based on everything we've dug into from this guide, the assessment, the budgeting, the debt realities, what is one specific small action you can commit to taking today? Not tomorrow, not next week, today. What's one thing you can do right now to start putting these ideas into practice in your own financial life? Figure that out and just do it.